What's going on, everybody? Welcome. Good morning. Good morning. It is the Saturday morning Stokastic NHL strategy show sponsored by BetMGM. I am your host, Josh Harris, who inexplicably stayed up to watch the Ducks-Sharks game that ended like 48 minutes ago. Joining me, as always, is Slim Cliffy. How you doing today?
Doing pretty good. I think I'm a little bit more rested than you. I was telling you before the show, Winnipeg, Tampa ended. A little gap where I could watch 10 minutes of the Arizona-Chicago game. And I watched about 3 minutes of that game and immediately shut it off. And I was like, I'm done for hockey for the night. I'm not watching this. I'm not watching San Jose, Anaheim. Kudos to you for staying up for that. You had a decent night last night, though. Mason McTavish. I got to say that Mason McTavish ruined your night, but that he was also your hat trick, I think, is kind of poetic in a sense. I'm sure you'd rather him not have scored there at the end of the game, but anybody that did follow your hat trick picks, they use them as a one-off, probably did pretty well last night.
Yeah, I was debating with myself. I was like, what do I like more, poetry or money? I settled on money. No, but I had him in my lineup, and then I kind of had a Cliffy experience with my one lineup last night. I made a few swaps. I ended up making a 3-2-1 with uncorrelated defensemen, which apparently really confused Niehaus. But when you are down to the nitty-gritty for your defensemen, you don't need to correlate them, especially when you're punting. You just go for the guys who have a shot at the block bonus. I used Fairbury and Carrier. They both had, I think they had 14 shots blocked combined. Then I had full Winnipeg 1. Pierre-Luc Dubois kind of got there. Connor had 2 points. Nikolai Ehlers had 3 shots on goal. Then I had Timo and Hurdle. Timo had 2 goals on 10 shots. And then I had a one-off Barrett Hayton. But for 2,700, 2 shots on goal is fine. I was winning the 150, the 40, the 12, the 5, and the 4. And then Mason McTavish scored to tie the game, and there was an offsides challenge, and he was clearly offsides. Some people were saying maybe Henry tagged up, and Toronto was just like, yeah, there's no evidence of him being offsides, and they overturned it. It doesn't, like, here's the thing, it's DFS, it happens. My gripe is there is nothing worse than an offsides challenge, no matter what side you're on, especially offsides challenge where teams are in the zone for like 38 seconds and then score, and they go back and see like, oh, his toe drag was like a centimeter short. You know what I mean? It is what it is. Still a good night. 1-7X. If I knew that was going to happen, I would have went to bed a little bit earlier, but here we are. I'm excited for this 7-game slate. We have some good games. We have Colorado, Edmonton. That should be a doozy. So I see someone in the chat says I jumped you on the OT goal for a 300Q ticket. If it makes you feel any better, I had Sharks money line. Again, money poetry.
Yeah, gotta find that balance. Not easy to do.
No, but it's fine because I'm a big Mason McTavish guy. I like seeing him on the top line. I like seeing him do well. He has 25 points on the season now. He turns 20 next week or something like that. So good for him. Yeah, I see Jake was busy this morning. He has totals and projections up in the lineup builder. Thank you, Jake. Our boo-boo head is at work early in the morning, and he's at Central Time, so it's 8 a.m. So let's get into the slate, but before we do, you know the drill. Especially you, Bacon, you know the drill too. Give us a like and subscribe so you can keep up with all of our shows, DFS offers, giveaways, and much more. Once you subscribe, hit that notification button to get alerts when our shows go live. Got to give them a bone or something. Don't forget to sign up for the Stokastic Hall of Fame by changing your avatar on DraftKings and FanDuel, which is easy. Download the avatar from stokastic.com/avatar. Then you got to place in the top 3 of a contest with over 5K contestants. That's the hard part, but if you do, congratulations to you. Also, you can tweet your wins to @StokasticHOF account if you have Twitter, or email us with your screenshot, and that'll get you 1 free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum. You also get a shout out on our weekly Hall of Fame segment, which is nice. Once again, thank you to BetMGM for sponsoring this show. And let's hop into this slate. Minnesota Wild with a 3.3 total. Heading into Buffalo, the Sabres have a 3.2. Marc-Andre Fleury, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen are probable. Once again, these are just the goalies who are in the lineup builder right now. Obviously, no morning skates yet. So just keep that in mind. You'll see goalie confirms throughout the day anyway. Matt Zuccarello is out tonight. Matt Boldy is going to jump up to the top line with Sam Steele and Kirill Kaprizov. It's good for Boldy. Also probably good for Buffalo 1. They are fully correlated as always. They are still very expensive. They are 22 and change on DraftKings. Minnesota has been a very good defensive team over the past 4 or 5 weeks. That being said, what can you say really about Buffalo? There are, like, Tage Thompson is just an elite player now, which is nice to see. I don't know if they're fully matchup proof yet, but they are going to avoid the Eriksson Ekline, so I do have some interest in Buffalo 1 here.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that going up against Minnesota is a tough matchup, but we just saw Buffalo go into Washington, and Tage Thompson put up a hat trick with 4 points. In Washington, we've talked about it a couple times on the last few shows that Washington has been a much better team basically since Halloween, and one of the top teams in the league, and pretty good defensively. Certainly on the penalty kill for most of it. And the Buffalo top line still shredded them. So I think we're kind of getting to the point, like, I know Florida's top line didn't get there last night, but I think we're getting to the point where, as long as these guys are together on a line and on the power play, they're in play on every single slate, no matter the matchup. So that Buffalo top line still been playing exceptionally well. I was looking at their numbers since December. 3.3 expected goals for, 7 actual goals. Like, they're shooting 16%, which is obviously high, but if you cut that in half, your shot volume is still so high that if they only shoot 8%, they're still scoring 3.5 goals, which is still a really, really high offensive scoring rate of 5-on-5. So they're just creating so much that they can, kind of weather shooting percentage dips as the season goes on. So I really do like that Buffalo top line. Obviously, we don't have our top stacks tools and all that up yet. I don't imagine there's going to be that much ownership, certainly not for a 7-game slate on that Buffalo top line here tonight. And the interesting thing is, Boldy and Kaprizov really haven't played a lot together over the last couple of years. It's typically been Kaprizov and Zuccarello on the top line. But Boldy and Cap in a limited sample, I think we're talking again, isn't a lot. Like, that's maybe 8 games worth, 9 games worth of ice time. Well below water by expected goals share, under 44%, 2.5 expected goals against, 2.8 actual goals against. Like, Zuccarello and Kaprizov are just, a pairing that just plays so well together that it's kind of hard to just plug and play another winger there in with Zuccarello, or in with Kaprizov, sorry. So I don't think it's necessarily a tough matchup against Minnesota 1. And the Minnesota top line, since the start of December, well below average by expected goals against. It was their depth lines that had been playing extremely well defensively. So I think there's a good case for going with the Buffalo top line here tonight in basically any format. I know, they are expensive. Off the top of my head, I think they're like 22-4. Just trying to do some quick mental math, looking at our lineup builders, and that is expensive, but it's not super prohibitive, right? Like, this isn't Boston 1 coming in at 24-8 on the road or something like that, right? So I think there's definitely some merit. Like, our lineup builder has them coming in at over 41 points on DraftKings tonight, and other than Toronto and Colorado and Boston, it's the highest number on the slate. and those are Colorado, Toronto, and Boston. You know what I mean? So obviously there should be some ownership here. I don't think there'll be a lot. I don't think the matchup is necessarily that bad. And like Minnesota's penalty kill is fine, but it's not super elite or anything, right? Like this isn't Boston or Carolina or something like that. And the Sabres are drawing a ton of power plays. They're now, second in the league in power plays drawn per game, just a shade behind Ottawa. Actually, we'll talk about Ottawa in a bit. I do think it's a good spot for Buffalo, especially with the way that they've been running their lines of late. The Buffalo top power play forwards, so the top line plus Dylan Cousins, like the top line around 19, 20 minutes, Cousins around 16, 17. Every other forward is basically between 12 and a half and 14 and a half minutes over their last, I think it's 4 games, basically going back to Christmas. They're just spreading the ice time around among the depth, and I'm hoping that their top line gets there. And I think that's another case for playing Buffalo 1 here tonight. If you're going to go and play the depth, I honestly don't know where you go at this point because, Quinn, Cousins, and Peterka have been playing well. And like I said, Cousins still getting reasonable ice time because he gets those power play 1 minutes. But Peterka and Quinn haven't been playing that much lately. They have some games, around the 11, 12-minute mark. Quinn only has 16 shots in his last 11 games, going back to his last goal scored. He hasn't been taking a ton of shots either. So I'm not sure exactly where you would go in the Buffalo depth. And I don't think you'd necessarily want to go up against the Minnesota depth either, right? Like I don't want to go up against the Eriksson Ek line. I don't want to go up against Hartman and Gaudreau. You know what I mean? Like those just seem like much worse matchups for the Buffalo depth than they would be Buffalo 1 going up against Minnesota 1. So it's Buffalo 1 that I really do like here. The Minnesota top line is kind of interesting because I don't think that there's going to be a ton of ownership there with Matt Zuccarello out of the lineup. Now, obviously, Kirill Kaprizov is good enough to pretty much carry any line offensively by himself, but it is worth noting that, in a pretty sizable sample without Zuccarello over the last couple seasons, the expected goals generated goes down by about 10%. It's not massive, but I do think it is notable and a commensurate drop in shot attempts generated as well. So I think Minnesota 1 is fine. I'm kind of wondering who would jump up to the top power play unit for Minnesota because it's the Buffalo penalty kill that's not very good, right? Like you kind of want to take advantage of that. So you have Eriksson Ek, you have Kaprizov, you have Boldy. Wondering who the fourth guy might be. Is it going to be Ryan Hartman? Is it going to be Sam Steele? Because if it's Steele, then the top line is perfectly correlated on the power play. I'm just wondering how they navigate that. I don't think we're going to get any news on who takes Zuccarello's power play spot until the game actually starts, and by then obviously it's too late. So we're just guessing. I would guess that they're going to put in Ryan Hartman because they need somebody to fill Zuccarello's spot. They don't need another center like Steele or something like that. So I would guess Hartman. We just don't really know. It's the Buffalo top line that I do like in this game. I do think there's some merit to going to the depth Minnesota lines because I don't think the Buffalo depth is particularly playing that well right now, or certainly not over the last few weeks or whatever. So I do think there's if we get some news Hartman's on the top power play unit like a Hartman Gaudreau 2-man or something like that, I think that would be fine. But I think this game's really all about the Buffalo top line.
Yeah, and I really like Boldy as a player, so moving to the top line I like, but he's a different player than Zuccarello is, and I don't know for whatever reason.
No, I was just gonna say Boldy's more of a shooter type. He's not a distributing playmaker like Zuccarello. Zuccarello can't score, obviously. He's shown that this year, but I think Zuccarello, at this point of their careers, has much more playmaking skills than Boldy does.
Yeah, Zuccarello plays with he's like a hobbit, but he plays with a 48-foot stick. I can't even remember the name of the whatever. But I don't know. Can it work? Yeah, it can. Steele's gonna have to, distribute more with Zuccarello out. So yeah, I do kind of like that Minnesota 1 line, especially if they're coming in low ownership. just because you're going to get the two guys on the top power play. I agree with you. I think it's going to be Hartman on the top power play unit instead of Zuccarello. But Boldy, Capper's off 2-man. If you want to leave off Steele, it's fine. Like, especially if they're lower owned, I have a lot of interest in that 2-man because it is like the Buffalo Sabres we're talking about here. It's not, the Bruins. They're not good defensively, so they don't have a very good penalty kill. Their goalies are either 112 years old or minor leaguers. So, yeah, I like Minnesota here. And then Buffalo 1, if they get any decent ownership, I'm in on. Has there ever been, my Saturday morning, just random thoughts of the day, I think Buffalo won the Eichel trade. I think it allowed Tage Thompson to develop into the player he is. Remember a few years ago when we're like, sweet, we got Tage Thompson on Eichel's wing for min price. He shoots the puck. The dude grew into his body because he's 19 foot, 7'7". You know what I mean? So now he has Alex Tuck on his wing, who is an exceptional player. And, Jeff Skinner now on his other wing, who is, for whatever reason, on the Don Granato team, on the fourth line for half the season.
I just to kind of build off that a bit, I'm thinking back to the Ryan O'Reilly trade when he went to St. Louis. At the time, and for basically a couple years after, that looked like a landslide win for St. Louis, right? Because Vladimir Sabaka didn't do anything, and he was out of the NHL in 2 years. Patrick Berglund just straight up said, "I'm not playing in Buffalo," and retired. I think
my man,
he gave up tens of millions of dollars to not go play in Buffalo. So, and then they had a couple draft picks, and then Thompson, and it was Thompson breaking out that kind of saved the value of that trade, which is weird to think about. The trade ended up working pretty well for both teams, whereas for the first couple of years, it looked like just an absolute home run for St. Louis. I think it's the way prospect development goes sometimes.
Yeah, and we just crap on the Buffalo organization for the past 5 years, and warranted. They didn't even try to compete a few of those years, but they've actually started to turn into a team, which is nice. They still have issues on the blue line, but it is what it is. Really do like Buffalo 1 tonight. Let's move on to the next one. Detroit Red Wings with a 2.4 total. Heading into Toronto, the Maple Leafs have a 4 total. Here we are with the Maple Leafs on the 4 total. Come for the Leafs 4 total, stay for the shutout. It's kind of what happens with it's so funny because you were telling me the other day, they're on pace for their best season in a while. I just feel like they're not even in the playoff spot because every time I play the Leafs, they screw me and I get mad and then I trash them. But I guess they're having a pretty good season. This is a really good matchup for the Leafs because Detroit's back-to-back on the road. They lost last night to Florida. Magnus Hellberg probable. Ilya Samsonov as well probable. Who knows if the Wings are going to retain their lines. They're back-to-back. They won't skate. They have a small total anyway. Don't have too much interest in the Wings tonight. This is a Leafs game. This is a Leafs top line game. I feel like they're going to be, for the top lines, they're going to get a lion's share of the ownership, making Buffalo 1 much lower owned, but for good reason. Leafs have a massive total. This is an unbelievable spot. What are you doing with the Leafs?
It's a very good question, Josh. I'm glad you asked.
Yeah, that's why I get the big bucks.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to mention is Toronto's embarrassing home loss to Seattle. Calle Yarncroc was moved off the second line in the third period. They didn't practice yesterday, not that I saw. So we'll see what morning skate looks like for the Leafs. They had Matthews there for a couple shifts. Obviously, I don't think Matthews, Marner, Tavares is going to stay together for an entire game. But then they moved Pontus Holmberg there for the final few shifts of the game. Don't know who's going to play with Tavares and Marner. And as we mentioned on the last show, Yarncroc is doing really good work on that line, helping them defensively. But I was looking at their offensive numbers, and they're even worse. Like Yarncroc played a couple games there earlier in the year, which is part of the sample. I went and cut those out and just looked at the last 4 weeks. The last 4 weeks together, Yarncroc, Marner, Tavares, 1.7 expected goals for per 60 minutes, 1 actual goal per 60 minutes of 5-on-5. Like, they're just not generating anything. That's, that probably can change pretty quickly with a new winger there. It depends who they put there. I'd like to see Pierre Engvall there, but I don't think that they're going to do that. Somebody like Dryden Hunt's certainly capable of moving up there if they want. Pontus Holmberg, if they want to leave them there. They're having a problem filling the role, filling that hole left behind by Ilya Mikheyev, especially with Nick Robertson hurt. So we'll see what Toronto 2 does, because it could be a pretty good matchup going into that Detroit second line. Like, as we often say, Kopp and Raymond typically have pretty bad defensive numbers together this season whenever they played together. Now, they added Jonathan Berggren to that Detroit second line, and he's actually been pretty good for Detroit this year. Small sample, like he's typically played at the bottom of the lineup, but I think he's second on the team in expected offensive impact, behind only Dylan Larkin or David Perron, one or the other. So he could kind of help that second line offensively. I don't think he's going to help them defensively. So it could be a pretty good matchup for Toronto too. It just depends who the winger's going to be. Obviously, the Toronto top line is the main event here. Like, I know they've kind of let people down, but their last 4 weeks, they're still 4.5 expected goals for, 5.1 actual goals for, shooting under 12%. So a normal shooting percentage. Like, they have bad games against bad teams. That's just been the calling card of the Toronto Maple Leafs for years now. One thing I did notice, not shooting as much since the Christmas break. Nylander, 18 shots in his last 5 games, which is good, but not what he was doing earlier in the year. Matthews only 16 shots in his last 5 games. I got to think it's just kind of a little bit of a lull for those guys. I did find it funny that it coincides with Morgan Riley's return. Nice little coincidental appearance by him in the lineup, and then all of a sudden starting to suck. But it is a very good matchup for Toronto 1, especially because of the Detroit penalty kill. Like, the Detroit penalty kill has been absolutely awful, basically going all the way back to Thanksgiving. So we're talking nearly 20 games at this point. Like, the Detroit penalty kill has basically been like Montreal, like Seattle-esque, worse than Montreal. You know what I mean? Like, it's a really, really good spot for the Toronto power play. So I do like the Toronto top line. If you want to mix in a Tavares or a Marner or something like that, I think it's more than fine. But I like Toronto, especially for the power play spot here tonight against Detroit. And obviously with no Ville Husso in net. As far as Toronto 2, we'll have to see who they decide to put out with Tavares and Marner at morning skate. But I would have at least interest in them in making some sort of Toronto power play stack, which I think is fine on a 7-game slate. On the Detroit side, I think it's worth noting Robbie Fabry jumped up to the top power play unit yesterday for Detroit. And it wasn't a case, and he was there over Michael Rasmussen. It wasn't a case of like Rasmussen being in the penalty box or just having a shift or something like that. Like, they just straight up put Fabry. I think after the first 2 power plays, they put him on for their last 2 power plays of the game. So you might have like Fabry. I mean, we'll see at warm-ups with what Detroit decides to go with. Fabry was playing with Kubalik and Veleno yesterday. I do think pairing him with Kubalik in a depth role could be conducive to good offense. Toronto's penalty kill hasn't been very good for basically the same stretch that I just talked about with Detroit. Certainly not awful by any stretch. But closer towards the middle of the league by shots against and goals against, like basically in line with like Florida. So I do think there's some merit to at least, looking at the power play guys like Larkin, like Perron. Maybe if you want to dig all the way down to a Robbie Fabry, I think Fabry makes a nice one-off at his price here tonight. So it would be the Detroit power play guys, if anything, but I don't really have a ton of interest here. It might be just Fabry one-off. Again, I think this is about the home team top line in Toronto 1.
Yeah, if you do want to get away from the Detroit top line and go to the depth guys, which Not sure why. I don't think I would in 1 to 3, 2.4 total back-to-back on the road. But we've talked about on previous shows how we kind of like Dominic Kubalik as a one-off. His price is just too expensive. Robbie Fabry, 3,400. He would probably be the only guy I would pluck out of the bottom 6 here. I guess I don't know if it's bottom 6. I guess you call the second line the Cop Raymond line, even though they've been atrocious. We'll have to see if Fabry's with Sundqvist and Suter. That's a really cheap filler line. That actually might not be the worst if you're trying to jam in Edmonton or Colorado power play. You know what I mean? Taking 2 of those guys Pia Suter, Robbie Fabry. If you're jamming in expensive power play guys, it's going to be ugly who you're putting them in there with. So I honestly don't mind Suter Fabry there if you need the salary savings. And I agree with your take there that I would love to see Pierre Engvall on the second line of Tavares and Marner. I just think they want him in the bottom 6 role for now.
I mean, to be fair, Toronto does have a really good third line. That Kerfoot, Camp, Engvall line is really, really good, particularly defensively. And I think that's something that, I agree with you. The team likes kind of having that little bit of a safety net in that line.
Yeah, and I'm happy that line is doing well. So that means Kerfoot probably won't move up anytime soon. We'll knock on some wood for that.
I swear to God, we're about an hour away from Kerfoot being on the second line at morning skate.
Yeah, I'm gonna after the show, I'm gonna go cook breakfast or something, and I'm gonna come back to 87 Twitter notifications saying Kerfoot's on the second line, and everyone hates their lives. But that's the way it goes. Let's move on to the next one. St. Louis Blues with a 3.5 total. Heading into Montreal, the Canadiens have a 3 total. Bennington's probable. Jakob Allen, Jake Allen is confirmed. We'll have to see what the Montreal lines look like. I would assume Doc, Suzuki, Caulfield will be together. The depth, we have to see the depth lines for Montreal because it's kind of important here because the Blues lineup is bad. I was trying to think of a fun SAT adjective and I can't. I'm just going to go with bad. So, if Hoffman's back in the lineup, if Gallagher's back in the lineup, there could be some interesting one-offs there. If the second line is Josh Anderson, Slafkovsky, Dvorak, don't mind a Dvorak-Anderson 2-man. I think Montreal top line's in play. But my favorite line in this game is going back to the Blues top line here. Thomas, Buchnevich, Kyrou. I don't think they're going to be sneaky anymore. I think the other night where you had them and you had that big night was the night to beat the trend with them, and you beat the trend with them. So that's nice. I think the secret's out. This is a very good power play spot. They are fully correlated. They're not overly expensive. I would venture a guess that they might be the chalkiest line of the night.
I mean, they could be. They are about 18K though, is the thing, is what might keep it from being the chalkiest line. But they very well could be because, a lot of the top lines tonight are on the road, right? Boston won, Colorado won, all on the road. Minnesota won, obviously not the same without Zuccarello, but still, you do have Buffalo. And San Jose won at home. We'll get to the Sharks a little bit later. Yeah. But the thing that's I want to note about the St. Louis top line is yes, very good offensively. They're scoring 4.2 goals per 60 minutes together this year. Buchnevich over 20 minutes in the 2 games without O'Reilly and Tarasenko. One thing I did catch in that St. Louis game against New Jersey the other night is that Kyrou wasn't on for the last 4 minutes of the game. He didn't get any ice time with the empty net. Not even super late. I think after they scored the empty net goal, he didn't get on the ice or anything like that. It seems like he might be, this might be a bad example, but Cole Perfidi from Winnipeg, you know what I mean? Kyrou will play more in general during the game, but he will not be on the ice if it's a 4-3 game with the empty net.
They want Shen on the ice for whatever reason. I don't understand their obsession with Braden Shen.
I mean, they love their veterans, but that's just one. It's not a reason why I wouldn't play Kyrou, but when you're paying up $7,500 for a winger, it's a guy that you hope would be on the ice towards the end of the game. If you're paying the same price as Brady Tkachuk or Mikko Rantanen, or he's a little bit cheaper than them, but you want him on the ice at the end of the game, and he's not. But they are very good offensively. They're going to get some of that Montreal 1 line. Montreal 1 has actually been good defensively over the last 6 weeks, going back to December 1st. 2.6 expected goals against, 2.8 expected goals for per 60 minutes. It's the goaltending behind them that's been kind of bad. And it's kind of inverted itself. Earlier in the season, Montreal's defensive metrics, some of them were awful and the goaltending was saving them. Now, some of the defensive metrics for some of the lines are getting better, but the goaltending's starting to kind of let them down. They just can't get everything in sync, which actually works out for their chances to get into the draft lottery, maybe get Connor retired. But Montreal 1 has been playing well. What bothers me is Nick Suzuki. I mean, we talked about how little he was shooting last game. I was looking at an even bigger sample, 28 shots in his last 20 games. That's under a shot and a half per game. That's seriously Alex Wenberg territory, to mention his name again. It makes it tough to stack the lines, right? Because you want to get, take Buffalo 1, for example. Even if Alex Tuch only has a couple of assists, maybe he gets a shot bonus or something like that, right? It's something that he can do. Doesn't seem like Suzuki can really do that. Certainly not with the way Montreal is playing. It makes it tough to 3-man stack that line, but it is a pretty good matchup going up against the St. Louis top line. I don't mind Montreal 1 here. I wonder if they come in a little bit over-owned because it is a 3 total. They are going to carry some ownership. They're not super expensive. I'm just looking at our lineup builder right now. I think it's 15.5 for the 3 of them. That's pretty cheap. I do like Montreal 1. It is a really good match for St. Louis 1. You're right. I do think they come in high owned. I'm not sure about the highest on the slate, but I do think they come in fairly highly owned. It's the depth matchups here that are interesting to me. You're right. If Mike Hoffman comes back, I think that changes a little bit because he's been playing pretty well for Montreal this year. Gallagher, I'm pretty sure, is going to be out. I think he's going to be out for at least another week, so don't have to worry about him just yet. But it's because Slafkovsky and Dvorak have just absolutely awful numbers together this year. They're up near 100 minutes at 5-on-5, 1.4 expected goals for, 3.1 against. They're getting just absolutely ran over. So I honestly, I can't believe I'm saying this. I don't mind even dipping down to a 2-man of Saad and Shen. If you don't want to go to a what might be a chalky-ish St. Louis. Oh yeah, I said it. A chalky-ish St. Louis top line. Saad and Shen haven't really played terribly together this year, up around 55 minutes, 2.5 expected goals for, 2.7 against. I think that's perfectly fine to go to, especially, like you said, with Shen being relied upon heavily over 19 minutes in his last 5 games. I don't mind a 2-man of Saad and Shen. Montreal depth, we'll see if they bring in Hoffman. As always, Josh Anderson went off is fine, or, I wouldn't even say Joel Armia, basically just Josh Anderson. But I think it's Montreal 1, St. Louis 1, definitely both in play. I don't mind, a 2-man from St. Louis 2 here.
Yeah, I actually don't. Just because Shen gets that power play time as well. They love him. He's actually been shooting the puck recently more. I know he had that random 9-shot game. That was his first game of the season, over 3 shots on goal. But he has been shooting the puck a little bit more. And for his price against Montreal depth, 3,800 top power play, I don't mind that at all. As we mentioned on the top of the show, we are sponsored by BetMGM. You can get 2 free months Stokastic plus Platinum and up to $1,000 risk-free bet when you sign up, make a deposit, and make your first paid wager at BetMGM. Easy. You just got to make a Stokastic account if you already have one. Just log in. It's free to make a Stokastic account. Then you make a BetMGM account, which, is easy. Deposit at least $10. Depends on your risk tolerance. Minimum for the risk-free bet is $10. Max is $1,000. You make your first paid bet. I have a bet for y'all. If you want to tell me on this one, over half a power play point, which means the player just has to get a power play point plus 200. The player is Jack Eichel going up against the Kings. It's plus 200 on BetMGM. So if you want to sign up for BetMGM, get that bet risk-free. Then you'll get 2 free months of Stokastic Plus Platinum. Pretty much a no-brainer opportunity there. I also got that bet from OddsShopper. It's really an awesome tool for all. You can shop lines. You can have a player compare tool, player prop tool. It's also free. So sign up at OddsShopper. Get that account going. There is some premium stuff, but most of the stuff is free. Most important part for this whole thing, click the link in the description below. We'll get credit. Help us. We'll keep bringing you free content. We all like free. So let's move on to the next one. Seattle Kraken, 3 total. Heading into Ottawa, the Senators have a 3.1 total. Party Marty Jones, Senor Fiesta, and Cam Talbot are probable. We haven't really seen Timmy Stützle in news, right?
Not that I've seen. He was at practice yesterday.
Yeah, so I we'll have to see. The lineup builder has him out, but I know he left in the last game, but came back. I'm assuming he's in.
He was at practice yesterday, so
yeah. I'm assuming he's in on that top line. If that's the case, I do like that top line here. It's a conundrum with the Kraken, you know what I mean? Like, most of their lines have decent defensive numbers. It's just the goaltending. Their penalty kill is bad because of their goaltending, and the Senators are very power play reliant. So, I don't mind getting to a Sens power play stack here. On the flip side, here we are again trying to figure out what line to stack from Seattle. I think it would be the Eberle, Burakovsky, Beniers line. They're fully correlated. They are on the power play unit that has been producing more. So I think it would be both top lines here.
I do want to start with that Seattle penalty kill because, yes, the goaltending has been bad. I was looking their last 18 games going back to Thanksgiving, penalty kill save percentage under 79%. That's bad. But they're also giving up a ton of shots. Like, they're giving up more shots per minute on the penalty kill than Edmonton is, just to kind of give a frame of reference there. So it's that double whammy of not playing well and the goaltending's not bailing you out. So it is a tremendous spot for, I shouldn't say tremendous because Seattle doesn't take a slew of penalties. This is in Arizona or something like that. But it is a really good power play spot for Ottawa. Like I mentioned earlier in the show, Ottawa leading the league in power play opportunities per game. And they do have a very good top power play unit. And those guys have been reliant on the power play for their production because the 5-on-5 typically hasn't been there, especially for the top line. The top line, I was looking since just the start of December, 3.7 expected goals for per 60 minutes, 1.4 actual goals, shooting under a combined 4%. Brady Tkachuk lines typically don't have super high shooting percentages, but even 4% is a little bit ridiculous. Tkachuk himself has 42 shots in his last 10 games. Like, he's getting to the net a lot. He's just having a tough time scoring. I think Seattle goaltending could be a perfect recipe to kind of cure that. I guess we'll see what happens. But that Ottawa top line has been playing exceptionally well. We don't have our top stacks tool up and running at this point in the morning. But I think Ottawa 1 comes in with a fair bit of ownership because of the power play match, because it is Seattle. They do have a 3.1 total at home. So I'm with you. I do like the top line. The second line's even playing pretty well. Also, 3 expected goals for, 2.1 against since the start of December. They're scoring, shooting over 11%, scoring 3.3 goals. DeBrincat and Bath at least 3.5 shots per game each over their last 10 games. So I think you can even 2-man stack them and just leave Pinto off, to be honest. Or you can do a power play stack of Stützle, Batherson, and DeBrincat. I think something like that is just fine as well. Leaving Brady Tkachuk off a stack is obviously pretty dangerous because, one of these days he's going to go for 2 goals on 9 shots or something like that, just absolutely slaughter a slate. But I do think you can leave him off some stacks if you want, and just make it a power play stack, save a little bit of money on the wing going from Kachuk down to DeBrincat or something like that. So I really do like Ottawa 1. I don't think like these, it's a small sample, but these iterations of the Seattle lines haven't been that great. Like they're really riding shooting percentages, especially the top line. The top line, only 1.8 expected goals for, 2.2 actual goals for. It's not really that good at 5-on-5. I don't really have a ton of interest in the Seattle top lines per se. I think the interest for me would come from the Bjorkstrand, Tolvanen, and Gord line, which feels kind of weird to say, but they have looked good since Tolvanen got there. They don't play a ton of minutes. Like, Bjorkstrand and Tolvanen might play like 12 to 14 minutes or something like that, and that's a problem. But it's not like they're being priced highly either. Like Bjorkstrand's in the high 3s, Tolvanen's in the high 2s. Like it's not a super expensive 2-man stack. I think they'd honestly be preferable to some Detroit depth in this game. So I honestly, if anything on the Seattle side, I think it might be going down to that third line and 2-manning some guys there. But for me, I think this game's all about the Ottawa power play guys. I think you can mix and match their power play stacks however you want.
Yeah, I agree there on the Seattle third line. They're under 10,000 the full stack. Don't think you need a full stack them. I think you can one-off or 2-man, especially if you're power play stacking. But yeah, Ottawa power play in a very, very good spot here. Let's move on to the main event of the evening, and this is actually the main event. I'm not yanking your chain. The Colorado Avalanche with a 3.2 total heading into Edmonton. The Oilers have a 3.3. Georgiev, Skinner, probable. Avalanche top line, ridiculous projection. And it's interesting because if Edmonton goes back to these lines, right, and they send out McDavid and Yamamoto against that Colorado top line, that's a good matchup for the Colorado top line. It also would free up Nugent Hopkins, Draisaitl, Hyman to go against Colorado depth, which isn't great. Again, like stacking Edmonton without McDavid just is awful. So I think you can add McDavid into that second line. We'll have to wait and see on lines. Again, like I don't think the lines really matter for Edmonton. I just think you play the power play guys and you move on. But Colorado 1, I think, would be my preferred line in this game.
Yeah, we'll have to see if Edmonton does change anything. One thing I did note is, Kyler Yamamoto's not really helping McDavid on the top line. I don't think that comes as a surprise. Yamamoto did play almost 22 minutes in that game on Thursday night, and that's without top power play time. It's just absolutely insane. One thing Yamamoto does with that Edmonton top line is really drag down the pace. I don't think that's a big surprise to anybody, but the defensive numbers really aren't bad for that reason. The offensive numbers are similarly not bad, which is in a way bad for McDavid, because if McDavid has not bad 5-on-5 numbers, then it's bad because he's supposed to be, kind of shredding the league apart, and he can't really do that with the wingers that he has. But the Colorado top line has been, fairly good defensively for most of the season. There have been some lapses, obviously, because these guys can play 24 or 26 minutes a game. You're going to have your defensive lapses when that happens, but they have been pretty good defensively. 2.3 expected goals against per 60 since Thanksgiving. Obviously, McKinnon was out for a little stretch in there, so it's not a huge sample, but I don't think it's really a great matchup for that Edmonton top line. That's why I agree with you. I think that the Colorado top line would be my preferred side here. They are fairly expensive. One thing we do need to watch for is news on Evan Rodriguez. He may be back here today. If he is, he's probably back on the top power play unit over JT Compher. Compher played about 20 minutes in the last game, so that's something definitely to watch. But I do like that Colorado top line for that reason. The Edmonton second line is kind of interesting here. Nugent Hopkins, Draisaitl, Hyman. I misspoke about that line yesterday on the show, but we're not going to drag that up. Nugent Hopkins, Draisaitl, Hyman don't have a huge sample, but they're up over 50 minutes together. 4.5 expected goals for, 3.4 against. Pretty high event. I don't think that's really that surprising. Now, Colorado, oddly enough, their depth has honestly been, or depth up front at least, has been good defensively for most of the season, especially the Logan O'Connor Cogliano duo. We'll see. I don't think that's the matchup they're necessarily going to get, especially if Evan Rodriguez is back. But, just stacking Nugent Hopkins, Draisaitl, and Hyman and leaving McDavid off, I think is viable in this one. The problem is Colorado really doesn't have a good penalty kill, and I think you want to, get as much of that Edmonton top power play unit as you can. I do like the Edmonton power play guys, but I think this is a slate where you can leave McDavid off and just go with the second line. That feels kind of dangerous, but I do think that's definitely an option, especially with McDavid playing with Yamamoto and Kostin. It is the Colorado top line that I like the most in this game. I'm hoping Jack Campbell starts. Maybe he doesn't. If it's Stewie Skinner, that might change things a little bit, but it is Colorado one that I really do like here.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see if Edmonton skates this morning. It would be nice to know with a little bit more clarity. If you are new to Stokastic, we can get you a 5-day risk-free NHL trial. Today is Saturday, so it'll get you into some of next week, maybe through Wednesday or Thursday slate. There's going to be a big slate on Tuesday for sure. You'll get full access to everything that we have to offer, which is important. The projections, the ownership, top stacks tools, rankings, the Discord, which is invaluable. Get you all that late breaking line change news, who's in, who's out. The top stacks tool is, we reference that a ton on the show. The lineup builder, we reference that a ton on the show. Get you, a test drive, the whole kit and caboodle, we can even say, for NHL. You can choose to renew if you like it. And of course you will. So click the link in the description below. Hop in that Discord, say I came from YouTube. I don't know what I'll do. I'll send you a pic of my dog. I have 4 dogs. So I'll give you a picture of my dog. If you're a dog person, sign up. Don't be ridiculous. Los Angeles Kings with a 2.7 total. Heading into Vegas, the Golden Knights have a 3.3 total. Phoenix Copley, Logan Thompson confirmed. It will be interesting to see if Vegas mixes up their lines. I don't think they will, but as it stands, it's Amadio Stevenson Stone, Riley Smith, Jack Eichel, Nick Roy, Carlson, Uncle Phil Kessel, and Paul Cotter. I like a Vegas power play stack here. Kings penalty kill is not great. Phoenix Copley has been very good though. But again, I don't know. I think you could full stack that second line, Eichel, Smith, Roy. Roy's only 2,600. Riley Smith, 5,300. I think this is a Vegas game. I don't like stacking teams going into Vegas, especially if Logan Thompson is starting. I don't know if I have much interest in the Kings tonight.
Should mention Jonathan Marchessault may also be returning tonight for Vegas, and so that second line might be Smith, Eichel, Marchessault, which would be kind of interesting. I'd wonder who they would send out as the shutdown line as well, because there were times this year where they were using the Vegas second line as the shutdown line. They used Smith and Eichel against Crosby the other night, so I assume you would get Smith, Eichel, and Marchessault out against the Kings top line, Kopitar, Kempe, and Byfield. I think that's a good matchup for that Eichel, Smith, and Marchessault line. And I also wonder how they'd run the power play unit, because Michael Amadio was the guy that got the boot when Eichel came back. So you have Eichel and Riley Smith on the top power play unit now. If Marchessault comes back, does Marchessault boot Smith or does he boot Stevenson? Because I think it would be booting Smith because that's what they had earlier in the season. It would just be interesting if they boot Stevenson, then all of a sudden Smith, Eichel, and Marchessault is perfectly correlated on the power play. So we're definitely going to have to see if Marchessault is back in the lineup. That's news that we'll get later today. Either way, both of these Vegas lines have been playing well. Mayo on the top line, 3.6 expected goals for, 2.4 against. They've been playing really, really well together, 4.1 actual goals. Amadio was under 15 minutes in the last game, though, but getting booted off the top power play unit. It's kind of concerning, especially if Marchessault comes back. Like, is he going to be playing like 13, 14 minutes or something like that? You know what I mean? Mark Stone's been shooting the puck a fair bit for a while now, 54 shots over his last 20 games. So I think the top line is definitely in play here, but especially if Marchessault back, I really do like Smith, Eichel, Marchessault. We don't really have a sample for the Kings top line with Byfield there. It's only been a few games. He's typically struggled earlier in his career. I don't know how much better he would be at this point on the top line than like Kevin Fiala or something like that. You know what I mean? So I do think it's a pretty good matchup for Smith and Eichel. We just got to see if Marchessault is back in the lineup. On the Kings side, I agree with you. There's just not a ton I like here. I think if anything, it might be that Fiala-Velarde two-man down on the third line going up against, Paul Cotter, Phil Kessel, or, Cole Sauer, Lecision, or whoever is in that bottom six. I think that's honestly where I would go on the Kings side. Two-man of Fiala and Velarde, two-man of Lizotte and Velarde, something like that. I don't have a ton of interest in the top six. I think for me, this is about Eichel, Smith, and possibly Marchessault returning.
Yeah, I agree. We'll have to keep an eye out for the Marchessault news, which will probably drop in like 4 hours at morning skate. Let's get to the last game of the night. Boston Bruins with a 3.8 total. Heading into San Jose, the Sharks have a 2.6. Sharks are back-to-back. They are home. They were in Anaheim last night. That's like a 12-minute drive without traffic, 7.5-hour drive with traffic. Boston top line, massive projections. There's so many top lines with massive projections tonight. I do really like the Boston top line here. They are very, very expensive, though. 23-2 on DraftKings. I'm wondering if on the Sharks side, if they send out Couture against Bergeron, because if they send out Hertl Meyer against Bergeron, I have no interest there. But if they send out Hertl Meyer against like Taylor Hall, Krejci, and Pavel Zacha, I have interest in going back to the Sharks here.
Yeah, and it's tough because they've been using weird. They haven't had a ton of home games in very recent memory, and before that, they were using some pretty weird line combinations. So exactly how this is all going to shake out is kind of still up in the air. And San Jose doesn't really like super hard match at home, anyways. It's typically you'll just see the top six against the top six. So I think the Sharks top line is definitely going to get some run against Boston too, no matter what. It's just it's a pretty brutal matchup. If we get news that maybe Swayman is starting, that's something else that could definitely move me in the Sharks' direction, especially with the number of penalties Boston takes. Boston is one of the most penalized teams in the league. I think they're up to like the 6th or 7th most penalties per game, like up in the Edmonton territory. So, San Jose 1 does have a little bit of appeal here. San Jose 1, I mean Hertl, Meyer, and LeBanc. They do have a little bit of appeal here, but Boston has a great penalty kill. They're probably going to see a fair bit of the Bergeron line. I just don't think I'm going to be in super highly on San Jose unless we get word that Swayman's in net. On the Boston side, the top line is obviously in play. Got cheaper, $22,200 on DraftKings. That's doable. You don't have to like super punt every single position on your roster if you do play them. the San Jose penalty kill, their goaltending has really fallen apart lately. All those guys are perfectly correlated on the top power play unit. If you really do want to save some money, I think you could sub out like Marchand for Taylor Hall or something like that, because Hall is expected on the top power play. But it is really Boston one that I like in this game. No interest in Boston 2. Maybe Boston 3, because if Boston does get out to like a 3-0 lead, you'll probably see that third line play a lot more. I think that's exactly what happened in their last game. Actually, the third line actually played like 16 or 17 minutes or something like that. So like a 2-man of like Coyle and Frederick or something like that, I think is perfectly fine against the San Jose depth. But it's the Boston top line. I think top line / power play. I think I want to include Taylor Hall in that conversation, that I really, really do like in this matchup.
Yep. I agree. And then coming up right after us at the top of the hour, the NBA strategy show at 10 a.m. with Terry and Adam. So if you're looking for the NBA strategy show, stick around at the top of the hour for them. Very good show there. Let's talk defensemen. You mentioned in Discord this morning that there are not many options for punt defensemen, and there really aren't. I wrote down a whole bunch of defensemen on my sheet here, and there's only 3 under 3K that I would probably play. The first one, I'll let you talk about like what you want to, obviously, but the 3 that I have circled here: Jamie Alexiak at 2,900 for Seattle, Kulak for Edmonton at 2,700. I think his minutes, he's been playing like 18, 19 minutes. I think that's fine at 2,700. And then Brandon Carlo at 2,800. If you want to get a little bit more expensive, I think Artem Zub at 3K is fine. Matt Roy, even for the Kings, at 3,200, and Nick Hague for Vegas at 3,600.
Yeah, one thing I'll say about Hague is Alec Martinez was back at practice yesterday, so if he's back in the lineup, that could kind of nuke Hague's ice time a little bit. Just something to watch for at morning skate. The other cheap guy I'll add is Jordan Harris from Montreal. Over 20 minutes in each of his last 3 games. It's a home matchup against a team that's pretty depleted. I think he's reasonable if you need a cheap punt. The mid-price guys I like: Hampus Lindholm, obviously from Boston, running their power play unit. Darnell Nurse, I'll always play him and when he's in that high 4s, low 5s range on DraftKings. And Philip Hronek, like I said, I think he might be a sneaky play here with how bad Toronto's penalty kill, really not awful, but certainly a big downgrade over the last 15, 20 games or so. The guys that I would pay up for are Cale Makar and Thomas Chabot. In net, real quick, I'll mention Cam Talbot. I do like him at home for Ottawa here tonight at a good price. Phoenix Copley, man, he's on the road. He's cheap. He's playing for a good team. Vegas could be a pretty tough matchup, obviously, but I don't mind him. If you need an expensive home goalie, I think it's Stuart Skinner that I would go to as long as he gets a start.
Yeah, if you're spending up, if Linus Ullmark is the guy, I don't mind him. If more of a cash play there, but who are you liking for your hat trick pick?
For my hat trick pick, I'm gonna go. It's not quite Spice, but I'm trying to follow in your footsteps a little bit here, and I'm gonna say Taylor Hall.
Wow, that was my guy too.
Oh, okay.
That is just weird. 6-goal night for Taylor Hall. Confirmed. Yeah, I'm not going to go super spicy, but I will keep it a bit spicy. I'll go Riley Smith.
Oh, I like it. Hopefully Vegas can get us there here tonight.
Yes. So for Slim Cliffy, I am Josh Harris. I don't know when we're back. It could be Monday. It could be Tuesday. I don't know. But we'll be back early next week. Make sure to click those links in the description. Smash that like button. Stick around for the NBA strategy show coming up in a minute here. Good luck, everybody.
Good luck, everyone.